Super. Hi, Vanessa. Good evening. How are
Hi,
you?
how are you?
Very good. What about you? How was the weekend?
The weekend was too short, as always.
That's exactly the topic where we are talking about today, right?
I know, and even here in the UAE, we're pretty lucky. We have that extended slow down Friday afternoon, easing to the weekend, which is, quite a gift compared to most other countries in the world. So, I think we do have it lucky to have that kind of lazy Friday afternoon bonus. So yeah, so I hope some of the listeners can also, ease into their weekend and really enjoy those 2 days.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're feeling lucky. Just before going into the topic of today, which I'm really curious about it because I'm
Hmm.
experimenting a few things. So I want to know more by some professional. It's one word, just to set the intention of this call. What's coming to your mind?
Um, sure, because there's so much going on in my life. I think direction. Direction.
Direction. Okay.
Yeah, I think, and I'll put it in context. I think sometimes we get so lost in the nitty gritty and the busyness of life that we actually lose what our direction and intention for life is, and we allow ourselves to become quite distracted.
Hmm.
And sometimes we need to be able to just dissect through the fluff and the noise and stay on our true path. And I think that sometimes it's just getting direction, whether it's in your health, whether it's in your focus, whether it's in your work, whether it's for support, family, where you're going on holiday is also a good direction as we come into the summer holidays. So yeah, so direction. So hopefully I can give people direction
Super.
today.
Super. I like his word to put my intention into it. It's which is
Mm.
friendship. I spend and I see as well a direction in friendship. I spent a beautiful weekend with some friends outside there. So friendship and the importance of having some direction as well with friendship. So now getting more into the topic of tonight's conversation, which is about the impact actually of busy life and stress. But just before going there, one of the things that would be important to see and understand and having an impact, out there, it's from where is your quest coming from? So, what is behind the need of addressing this really important topic?
I think for me, my stress is one area, and well-being that I work in. I work in quite a lot, being a functional health nutritionist. Um, I think for me, it started, and I know we spoke before about this, when I watched a very close member of my family who was a medical doctor suffered terribly from cancer, and I was very young at the time, very dear lady, was a great aunt, and it kind of piqued my interest in medicine and health. And fast forward quite a few years later, I kind of got into foods and then started training in nutrition because I was interested in it. But I think really the crux for me came just about would have been 5 years ago. I have nothing against pharmaceuticals, medication for the right time, but I unfortunately, I had an adverse drug reaction. And what that means is I had a antibiotic that literally triggered chronic fatigue syndrome and destroyed my mitochondria. So for about 2 years of my life, here I was trained, supposedly knew what I was doing, was very sick, got antibiotics for a bronchial infection, and that literally crippled me to the point that I'm still battling 5 years on. And that's really been a big motivator. It kind of pulled back some of my personal plans because I was literally unable to get out of bed. But for me, it's been understanding that we as an individual react so differently to life, to situations, to medications, to food, to nutrients, to supplements, that there is literally no one size fits all approach. And finding somebody who can connect the human body in a functional, integrated means, rather than, Western medicine is really good at putting it in boxes. So gynecology, urology, all of these things. But the reality is that well-being is a whole body experience, and that's not just internal body. We know that stress has specific, which is a psychological. Our mental stress is psychological. It's not physical, but it has a physical impact. And that for me was really just a key kind of understanding that personalized health and well-being is one more than just the physical. It's the psychosomatic, and that's where you come in terms of coaching, support,
Right.
helping people unlock limiting beliefs, and that is a very big part of health, and has to be for overall health.
Really important. It's I'm really curious into this topic, and having an understanding of what the whole is and the impact it's is a 360 discovery about what's happening in our body and how we react to external kind of the external environment and external stress, the external input coming in. So to be more specific and detailed on the impact that stress can have on the body, on our body. How do you see that? What actually happened to our body when we are in a stressful situation?
Okay, so I think the first thing to understand is that there are two types of stress. The one stress is actually really good for us, and that's called your hormesis effect or your hormetic stress. And that is things like going for a run. So we put our body under stress, and it's temporary and it's short. We do something like we'll go into an infrared sauna, or we'll do, go into a cold river. For example, we went in Montenegro, jumping in the river, and you feel that rush of adrenaline, and it's freezing, and you jump out, and it's fun. And those sort of stresses, even mental stress, is actually good because it stimulates the body to respond. And that's how we see growth in the body. When you go to the gym and you train, we see a short period of stress on the body. And what happens is when the body comes to repair that stress from lifting weights or going from a run, that's actually when we see the muscle fibers being repaired. And by the repair, we see growth. So there is good stress, and then there's the stress that we are desperately trying to avoid in the 20th century, which I think is more where we focused on. So understand that there is good stress, even mental stress, prepping for an exam, if you have a presentation, those sort of things. They're stretching your ability and they're pushing your boundaries so that you can learn and grow and expand as a human in your capability. The problem we have is that when stress is chronic, and by that it means relentless and enduring. And I've got a list, because when I started it, I work in kind of one or two areas, but when I went into some of the research studies, this is from a study done in 2017, they basically analyzed all the different areas where stress has a physical negative impact, so chronic, long-term stress. So if you're in a very stressful job and you're not finding that break on the weekends or in the evenings to de-stress, and we'll talk about things to do even during the day a bit later on, and giving you some tools. But what we see is that it also depends on personality type. We all know that type A personalities generally thrive on stress, and then there are other people where the same stressful situation will be more negative. So it depends on the person. But what we see is that it actually impacts our immune system. So the first thing we're looking at here is our T cells, and they are part of our key immune system, and that will allow us to be more susceptible to viral infections. People who are asthmatic, they have an increased histamine response. So your histamine response is kind of when you get the flushed cheeks. You may get the sweats in the hands, in the armpits. So some people, they have such a high perspiration rate, which is a vasodilation, which means dilating of the veins, and blood rushes through, and this is why we get red cheeks and sweating. And that can also trigger a histamine response, which can then cause people who've got bronchial issues, so asthmatics, and that can then lead to impaired breathing and very low, we only breathe into the diaphragm instead of into the full belly. And what that means is that your lungs aren't expanding properly, so you're getting less oxygen. So you're going to feel more fatigued because oxygen is essential for life and for energy production. So, so we're talking about energy levels as well. We also know that stress is directly related to cardiovascular disease risk, to metabolic disease. It makes you more susceptible to diabetes, hyperlipidemia or high cholesterol, as well as high blood pressure. And the reason for that is when we're under chronic stress, we have, I think most people would know, the fight or flight syndrome. So when we're way back in our evolution, when there was a threat to us as a human, we would have a huge surge of adrenaline. And what adrenaline does is it releases energy into the bloodstream from our glycogen stores, which are muscle, or the liver. And that fight or flight needs energy in order for us to protect ourselves. So obviously flight, you would run away from the threat, or fight would be turn and fight. So when we're looking at what is happening in the body, when you've got ongoing stress and the body is releasing this adrenaline and the cortisol, you've got this ongoing fight or flight sensation happening. And because of that, we continuously have high blood sugar in the bloodstream. And this is why it then impacts on these metabolic related conditions such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, insulin resistance. Weight gain is another classic one. People who are under eating, they're undernourished and they're stressed, they are still seeing weight gain, or they see the complete opposite. Huge weight loss can happen in certain instances. We also can see that, and stop me at any time if you've got any more questions. And yeah, so people listening, if you've got questions, please pop them in the chat box. We can get to them later as well. I'd love to answer anything on here. And the other thing that happens is when we're stressed, we see an increase in the acid concentration of the stomach. And traditionally, we thought that was what caused stomach ulcers, but stomach ulcers are caused by a bacteria, which is naturally occurring, but it just gets and it roots into the stomach. But what it means is that, the stomach is one of, we have the mouth, part of digestion, but the stomach is the second place where we're digesting protein. And if we're altering and changing the stomach acid levels, even though it's higher, we're ultimately affecting the body's ability to digest and to absorb the nourishment that we're eating. Wow. So, your body, so like, it's just these little things, and it just,
Yeah. Something to do with inflammation as well. There is any?
Yes. So inflammation is quite a big one, and that stems back to having continual. So it's your immune system. So the T cells are linked to your inflammatory response, as well as your increased blood glucose from the increased cortisol and adrenaline from the fight or flight. So when we have high blood sugar for a long time in the body, it just means that we have inflammaging, or as a result of increased glucose in the blood, we see an increased inflammatory response. And inflammation, and also I think with stress, people are stressed, and in the situation of stress, we generally find that people are not able to, chronic stress, they're not always looking after themselves because their focus is always on what needs to be done, or this meeting, or this financial stress, or this family situation, or medical, whatever the stress is, because it's chronic. We often see that people forget to eat. People are then relying on things like coffee. I love my coffee. You're Italian, so I know there's coffee, and there's nothing wrong.
I'm reducing it to be.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with coffee, except that when you're tired and your body's under stress and you have lots of caffeine, and caffeine is being used as a booster to pep you up instead of having proper nourishing meals, that's going to place extra strain on your adrenals, which is where you get your cortisol being released from. So it has a double whammy effect. Yes, it's a double-edged sword. Yes, it's going to pep you up, but it's actually putting more strain on the body because it's a stimulant.
Mhm.
So that's where we get more inflammation kicking in. People are generally doing takeouts. So most of the people I work with who are in stressful jobs, they don't have time to look after themselves. They're eating takeout, or they're grabbing something and it's not pretty nourishing. And those sorts of foods also then add on the inflammation, that inflammation bucket that's building up, building up, building up. And I
It's,
think that.
it's sorry, it's good in a way as well to, we were speaking at the beginning of the fact that actually stress can also be seen as a positive in a way, when we put the body under stress for a very limited period of time, is a way as well to grow a specific area of the body. Again, if there is
Yeah.
some training to be done or some mental stress to be specific and on a very specific timeline. And if we have this prolonged, lifelong stress attitude and busyness attitude, that's where we see all those things coming in and actually affecting on the long term the body, as well as I imagine performances and the way actually we do it.
Yeah.
So looking at this, can we influence obviously in the positive way stress through
Yeah.
lifestyle? Yeah.
I'm gonna take you a step back because I actually want to give the listeners a few stats because people don't often believe me. And another two things is that stress is also directly linked to psychosomatic issues, anxiety, and depression. So often when we can alleviate stress correctly, and that's obviously something I know that you and the team work a lot with, is how to manage stress and to allow people to become better versions of themselves. But just overall, in 2020, in America, the Americans and I think we mimic that to some degree as a first world country here in Dubai with heavy commercialism, businesses. It was a pandemic of stress, and the statistics are as follows: 33% of adults feel extreme stress. So not just mild. A third of all adults feel extreme stress on an ongoing basis. 77% of people feel that stress has a negative impact on their health. So yes, it's subjective, but 77% of people, for whatever reason, maybe they can't get to the gym, they're not eating well, they're not sleeping well. That's a very common thing that happens because of that cortisol fight or flight response that affects your cortisol. We've got what we call the diurnal graph for cortisol, and it goes up and it comes down. And what happens is when we keep it up through the day, it's going to affect your sleep at night. 73% of people have stress that will impact their mental health and well-being, and 48% of people say that they have trouble sleeping because of stress. So when you look at those numbers, you can understand that stress it is all around us, and most people in some shape or form are experiencing stress that has a negative impact on the life that we're meant to lead. And I'm one of them. I'm a type A personality. I thrive on stress, but I've had to really work hard about disconnecting, being focused on my exercise, because exercise and running is a de-stressor for me. It's not a stress. It's where I love running. And I have to be very diligent because work can be all consuming, even for me.
Right. Having a kind of an active approach, because we speak about those, we speak about those subjects, and we don't put the right focus in a way in our lifespan. So we see it because the body reacts. So when we have that moment of life or throughout the job when we see ourselves stressed, the body reacts, and we need to put the right focus into it. So how we can influence, you were already mentioning something that you're already doing, like training for some specific type, what I understood, and maybe some other tips for other people. But what can we do to influence stress through lifestyle change?
So I think just as a caveat, and I think this is, most people understand this, but just to be clear, like whatever recommendations I give are just, it's not a recommendation. We're online. I cannot give any advice. I'm not a medical doctor. This is just information. Whatever you do, if you're going to implement anything, please use your common sense. Please check it with your doctor, your health practitioner, especially if you have on medication or if you have underlying issues, because I am going to talk a bit about supplements and everything later. So please just, as a headline, just keep it in perspective here. This is information. I think, it depends on the person. For some people like me, going for a run is very therapeutic. It allows me to get rid of some of that angst and get rid of some of my pent up frustration, because we feel it in our muscles as well. We do get muscle tension. Back tension is a very common one. I'm just looking for a second. I'll find it later. I want to show people a little trick, especially if you suffer from tension and tension headaches. There's a fascia release. I'm also a Pilates instructor, so I work a lot with the body as well as on the inside. So the first thing is sleep. Sleep is essential, and trying to get into a good sleep routine, sleep hygiene. Making sure that, I know we're on late tonight, but 20 minutes before you go to bed, shut off all blue devices. Better yet, get blue blockers. I'm not wearing mine tonight because of the glare, but you can see there, I do have blue blockers. These are kind of your basic ones, but you also get the red lenses. That helps to optimize your melatonin so you can sleep better. I don't recommend melatonin supplements because they actually disrupt your normal melatonin cycle. So don't take those, just because I said melatonin there. The other thing that we can do is really look at having a very plan your diet, plan what you're eating. Because if you're not eating things that are nourishing, you're going to be putting your body under stress, which is already dealing with all this other stress coming in. So plenty of, and I don't want to be too prescriptive because, just make sure you get a good amounts of protein, whether it's your vegetarian sources, whether it's meat sources, it doesn't really matter. As long as you are getting approximately 1.8 grams of bioavailable protein per kg on average is a good source. Protein helps your brain to repair. It helps prevent the inflammation that we spoke about. Fatty fish is also a really good one to incorporate in your diet. It's got omega-3s, and omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. And we know that omega-3s will also help to reduce the risk of depression that comes as a result of stress. So if you feel that things are overwhelming, omega-3 and also vitamin D is also an inflammatory molecule. It's not a vitamin. We call it a vitamin, but it's actually more of a pre-hormone cursor. And that is very good for helping with depression. And that's in the literature and the science out there. So, fatty fish. The other thing in terms of lifestyle is exercise. So for me, going for a run, that's my mojo, or going even for Pilates. I'm a Pilates instructor. I love a Pilates class, but it's got to be, for me, a good, heavy, sweaty one. That's what I like. And yet, on the other hand, for some people, that is just their worst form of exercise because it sends their stress levels into too much, and they don't enjoy that. And for people like that, who prefer something more calming, a good yoga session led by a good yogi is phenomenal. And the reason for that is often that it's actually helping to calm down the adrenals. So if you're feeling like you want to get the body moving, go and do a yoga session. If the thought of hitting the gym is just far too much, but yet a very calming, soothing environment for yoga is really helpful. I also recommend plenty of vegetables, lots of vegetables. And the reason for that is the fiber, the prebiotic content. And the fiber will really help to ensure that your gut microbiome stays nice and healthy. And the reason that's important is when you're stressed and you're not eating correctly, you can't have your beautiful symbiotic gut microbiome operating optimally. And we know that 80% of our serotonin, which is our happy hormone, is made in the gut. So if you aren't nourishing your little gut buddies, as I call them, they're not going to be sending and giving you all the serotonin you need, which is absolutely essential. If you're under stress, you need to have as much of that happy hormone in you so that you can function well and work through that stress and come out the other side.
I see. So if you want to say it's like um, sleep, food, nutrition, and a good amount of exercise, whatever that means for you. That can be
Yeah.
like a run, it can be a yoga meditation session. Um, I'm curious about those three main pillars. Are they equally important? What I want to say by that, can I focus more on one to have a bigger impact, or having a good fair amount of all the three is going to make a bigger impact?
I think this is where it becomes down to the personalized approach. So if you are sleeping terribly, you need to focus on your sleep first. So instead of trying to address all of these things, for somebody who's already stressed, trying to address food and sleep, and some lifestyle changes and maybe some supplements. And I've also got a few other things that you can actually, like physical tools that I'll show you that you can do in the office if you're finding that you're overwhelmed or wherever that situation is, whether it's dealing with the kids, me sometimes, that it can help you calm down. And it's really about mentally just having a check-in and go, what's my biggest challenge? Sleep. Okay, right. Let's focus on sleep. Don't eat 2 hours before bedtime so that, and make sure that when you're eating late at night, it's things like chicken, walnuts, because they contain tryptophan, which is what we need as our precursors for our sleep hormone cycle. So it's all about just optimizing what you're eating, when you're eating for sleep, trying to get up early, getting some, early morning sunshine, being barefoot. The grounding is a science, being barefoot or standing on a grounding mat, even on the beach. I know it's hot, but on the beach, if you're going away for the summer holidays, make sure you get your feet on Mother Earth, because like we earth a plug and a house, that exchange of electrons also happens to the human body. And if you go and see, and I don't actually have any, I'll see if I could share it, but you can actually see the impact of people who had inflammatory responses on the back of their spine from stress. And they just went out into nature for 20 minutes, barefoot, in touch with nature. And then they did another scan. And to see the difference is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, Mother Earth it's healing, and I don't want to sound like a crazy hippie here, but, I only talk science, and, I've seen the studies. I try and practice it myself just every day, even if it's 5 minutes outside barefoot in the garden on the grass.
You were mentioning a bit about, then it depends as well on which kind of type. So you were speaking about type A, B, and C, and there is a question about, can you tell us a bit more about different types can react, how different types can react differently to stress?
I'm not an expert on the type, the personality type, so I don't know if you know them. I'm a type. I'm a type A, so I suppose I know that I'm very stressful. And I can deal with a lot of stress, but I internalize it. And that's why running for me is a stress relief. Um, I'm not really that sure on the type B's and C's, but I would expect that there are people who are generally a more, more gentler kind of personality. And for them, that's where the more calming, relaxing focuses like the yoga, Pilates, even things like dance, piano, playing the piano, things like that, that just bring your, that just kind of feel like bring you down. And that's that sensation that you want to get, is you just want to be centered and just feel like it's calming you. And that's what you'd be wanting um, to go for.
While you were saying, I was searching for my grounding actually. In a way, you were leading that grounding exercise. Um, so we spoke about some lifestyle changes, nutrition, obviously, really important. Food we eat is actually the way that we impact our body the most. Any recommendation in terms of supplement support on well-being?
Yeah. So, like I said, just this is information, not recommendations. So, I think in my arsenal for stress, I have 3 to 4, which are kind of my go tos, which are sort of kind of ubiquitous, but have a purpose. So the first would be omega-3. Why? Because omega-3 is very difficult. We do get vegan forms, but omega-3 generally in our diet is lacking. And we are much more in an inflammatory state as a result of pesticides, toxins, the life we live, just everything. Our bodies are in a very pro-inflammatory state. And that obviously leads to inflammation. So if we're dealing with stress, which builds on inflammation, then the best thing we can do is pull down inflammation, because inflammation is one of the biggest triggers of chronic disease. So omega-3 is an anti-inflammatory, and it is very difficult for the body to really make omega-3. So omega-3 is definitely one for me. And always look, when you're buying omega-3, always look for a cold pressed, wild caught option. And the reason for that is the cold pressing helps to retain the oil's integrity, so there's no oxidation under heat. Sometimes they use heat or chemical extraction because they get more out. My first undergrad was in food technology, so I've actually worked in a fish factory back in the day. Never again. But yeah, so that's what they do. So obviously they're trying to maximize the yield from the catch or from the crop harvest. The other thing is that if it's from fish that has been farmed, because of the farming, even though they are in the nets, there's not a lot of water rushing through, and you generally find that the toxin levels, especially mercury, can be a lot higher in your farmed. So you're always wanting to be looked for wild caught omega-3, because otherwise you're increasing your toxin load. Or ones that at least have been checked and have got a low mercury sticker on them. The other thing is vitamin D. Now, vitamin D for me is super important and is one of the most underrated sort of supplements we have around. And the reason I say vitamin D, one, we generally don't spend enough time out in the sunshine. We should be getting 50 minutes of whole body sun every day, early morning safe sun, in order to trigger enough vitamin D. And because we aren't getting that, and vitamin D is very, it's very low as a food source. There's a little bit in cod liver oil, a little bit in egg yolk, but generally we can't eat sufficient quantities of it. And vitamin D, when it is low, there have been studies done of people who had anxiety and mild depression. So not your kind of significant or heavy depression. And people were given in two groups. And the one was given Prozac, an SSRI, and the other one was given vitamin D supplement. And they did blood work and a subjective analysis of what the people felt, how they were, and their mindset. After the study was completed, they obviously repeated the same blood work and did the same subjective analysis. And for those people who had mild anxiety and mild depression, it was exactly the same result in terms of their improved blood markers as well as their subjective analysis. So, and the other thing that we've done is that the studies have been done is that people who are on very, very high doses of Prozac, when they optimize their vitamin D levels above 60, so the range is between 30 to 100. When you're hitting 60, one, we know that you live for longer, an average 1.97 years to be exact. And we know that they can actually reduce their medication by 25%. So vitamin D as a support for the brain and it's an anti-inflammatory molecule is obviously essential. And if your vitamin D levels are low, I would encourage people to get tested and then keep their vitamin levels at around 60 plus to just help, especially if you're feeling mentally stressed. The other one that the other two are herbal supplements. Now, with herbal supplements, always be super careful that there's no contraindication with medication. Ashwagandha, especially with the thyroid, is a no-no. So ashwagandha is an adaptogenic herb, as is rhodiola rosea. And both of those are very well suited. They're very safe. They have been used very much in your Ayurvedic and Indian kind of Eastern medicine for thousands of years. No safety risk, except obviously if you've got extenuating conditions. And they are adaptogens, and they really help to calm down the adrenal glands, which are responsible for the production of cortisol. So yeah, so those are the kind of the four that I would put in. I mean, there's literally hundreds. I mean, there's even a probiotic now that you can take to help with stress, because like I said, you know, you want your gut buddies to be giving out all the good stuff.
Thanks a lot, Vanessa. A lot of, as you said, information at this stage. Those are all things to put again a focus on and to research more. It's also really important to understand the scientific aspects of all those researches and all the studies that you're doing. Those are all researches. Those are all scientific studies. Going checking time and going towards the end of this beautiful live on what we can do to improve our performance in a different way and in a more peaceful way, if we can say that. If you want to say a bit more about the study that you're doing, so the scientific aspect of all your work and what you're doing, and I also strongly believe that whatever we do in life, we need a strong guide as well, an expert, someone that knows exactly all the things where they're coming from and why, okay, we are doing certain things. So tell us more about studies, what you're doing, research, and what is as well the Wellness World Club and how you can help us in this quest. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so in terms of studies, I have done my master's thesis was in nutrigenomics, which is how our genes affect our body's ability to digest and absorb nutrients, or how those genes demand more nutrients and need more things in order for them to work well. So a lot of the people may have heard of things like MTHFR, which is quite a well-known one, which is all about how our body methylates. Now, methylation is a process on top of our genes. So even though we've got genes and we may have genes that are maybe not so favorable, I, by the way, have got the most horrific genetic panel of anyone I have ever tested. But it doesn't mean that that's my endpoint, because by optimizing my diet, my supplements, my lifestyle, my blood work is still beautifully within range, my cholesterol. I mean, I should be having horrific cholesterol. I should be on statins if you look at my cholesterol panel. But by working hard, I've been able to mitigate my genetic impact to some degree. I mean, there's some genes you can't change, but a lot of the more chronic diseases that we estimate around, but somewhere between 10 to 20% of genes are going to be linked to disease. But it's more about the 80% lifestyle choices that are going to trigger our genes to turn on and off. And so over the years, I mean, I did that in 2015. And now over the years, I'm busy with my PhD. And as I was saying to you, I'm just delving. The topic is because of my personal experience in the mitochondrial issues from my adverse drug reaction to a fluoroquinolone antibiotic. I have been, chronic fatigue. I am very much interested in the mitochondria because that is where all energy comes from. And actually our cholesterol is made in the mitochondria, and so is pregnenolone, which is our mother hormone, which is responsible for our androgenic and female hormone path. So the mitochondria for me is just where everything sits, because if your mitochondria aren't optimized, you're not going to be burning fuel, you're not going to have energy, and that impacts everything in the body. So I've gone right back down, and that's what I'm doing my PhD in. It's in the mitochondria, but the area keeps shifting around. And I think I've found the topic, but I'm kind of debating. I'm going to be studying later tonight, and it is about how many calories we need, because the mitochondria can actually create, through exercise, there's things called piezoelectricity, which is energy, almost like friction energy, that is created. So we actually can also semi-create energy ourselves in the body. So it's a fascinating new area of research, and it's very interesting. And actually on that point, I'm going to quickly, if you don't mind, I'm going to just give people two tips that reminded me. If you are in a situation and you are stressed and you need to calm yourself down before you do something, no matter where it is, here are two techniques. The first is called the butterfly. Okay, so you literally take your hands, take your fingers, and when you are stressed, it doesn't really work that well when you aren't stressed. But let me just stand back a bit there. And what you do is you just put it here and you tap. And you just breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. So imagine a box. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, and hold for 4. Breathe in for 4. So that's called the butterfly tap. And when you're stressed, that can really help calm you down. It's actually a technique I use with my daughter. And it's a beautiful one because it's a butterfly. So when kids are stressed as well, it's a very good one. And also for them, the breathing I do is breathe in and then blow out a candle. Breathe in. It's simpler for them. So that's one way. And the reason for that is the tapping sensation helps to activate the vagus nerve, which is integral, that connects our brain and the gut together. And that's why the breathing with the diaphragm as well. One, it gets oxygen in, but as the diaphragm goes down and expands, it actually pushes against the vagus nerve. And that's very, very useful. The other one is this one. So you start up high, rub your hands together. You should have your arms out nice and long. I don't have enough space. And you rub, and you rub, and you just slowly bring your hands down to your heart, bring them in, and then you just cover your eyes. And you just press in and take them away. So those are just two very simple and this friction just helps to invigorate the body. So that's where that piezo, like electricity, that physical movement actually helps to self-generate energy in the mitochondria. So very interesting new field that we're moving into. And so the Wellness World Club is a collaboration of 2 other shareholders. It's myself, There is the lovely Russian Nishat and the lovely Lisa Durante. We've come together. We met a while ago. We all have interests and a passion in well-being, and Wellness World Club was born out of the idea of creating a trusted partner that you can come to and really deep dive into your health and create a unique pathway that is specific to you through genetics. We also look at blood work analysis. We look at lifestyle auditing. We look at your body analysis, and we give you what we call as a health blueprint, and that's our first product. And the health blueprint is really there to really set you up for a good, long, optimal health span. Because there's no point living until 80 years old if you're spending the last 10 years of your life on an old age home sitting in a wheelchair because you can't get out anymore. And that's kind of where, that's what we want to do. We really want to help people live their full optimal life, whether it's so that they can make a difference and live a life. So that's the first part of Wellness World Club. And then we've got our Vitality program, which is 1 month in-depth reviews. So, we have a stress protocol. We have a protocol for gut health. We have a protocol for metabolic syndrome. So definitely working into your, glucose meters, looking at how do we positively improve your blood glucose levels. We've got a few of these really in-depth, specifically targeted programs. And then we've got our flagship, which we've seen some amazing results on, where we actually put a stake in the ground and say, we are going to reduce your biological age over 3 months. So it's an intensive 3-month program. We look at body optimization techniques like cryotherapy, cold baths, infrared saunas. So really just trying to bring the everyday science. There's a plethora of information out there, but to try and get what actually applies for you is so confusing for people. Eat eggs, don't eat eggs. Eat meat, don't eat meat. Eat beans, don't eat beans. Eat this, don't eat that. I could literally, like, every day you open the newspaper and one day, Times Magazine will say this, and then 2 months later it'll say the complete opposite. Right. And people are confused, as am I half the time. And that's when it comes about looking to see, what are your genetics? What are your challenges? Where is your life? Let's make a plan that works for you. And so the longevity is really about also taking people that need a bit of hand holding and really just helping mentor them. So we look at inner cellular health, we look at the outer physical health, as well as looking at the psychological, like, what do you need? How can we coach you on this journey? And the importance of this. I'm speaking to
right. So it's all tailored approach based on having
health.
Have a dedicated session and trying to understand what challenges are behind and how you to act on those. Right. We're gonna put obviously all the information when we finish the live on all the channels we are streaming, with all the details, how to reach you, how to know more about it. It's also really important I was thinking on the coaching perspective. Again, everything is considered, we need to consider the whole. So if we're looking at performances, if we're looking at thriving, if we're looking at whatever we're doing in life, you want to reach the peak. I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I want the coach, actually, because obviously stress is going to be there and challenges is going to be there. So we really need to take care of it, to be focused on it, and having an approach where, again, speaking from a coaching perspective, understanding what's behind, what we can do things differently, and at the same time supporting this path with mental, physical health, trying to understand how to sleep better, how to eat better.
Yeah.
The whole is what's going to bring us in a higher state, if we can call it in this way.
Absolutely. I cannot agree more. And I think, even with me, like, when I work in just my sort of like one-to-one sessions, because I work, we've got the club program, a lot of my time is spent about limiting beliefs. Um, this is reward systems as well. I mean, I'm guilty. Like, yeah, do this, and mommy will give you, you can have ice cream if you win your swimming race. It's terrible, but but a lot of more, I don't do it often, but even that reward, using food as a reward, perpetuates a control, that people then seek out food when they've done something well, or that comfort food thing, and that's where there's a lot of things that need to be broken down and reset and revisited and pulled apart, so that you can actually put it back together in a way that's going to help the clients and elevate them to a higher sense of self. And that's just in who they are and how they approach the world and how they approach well-being, nutrition, eating, exercise, how they live. Because without health, your life, not, people live very productive lives. Steve Hawkins, you just have to look at that amazing mind. But without your health, you live a less productive life. So
Yeah. And sometimes also we try those DIY approach, in our life, which are not going to bring you anywhere. So that's where I see, when we start to realize that you need to go to the right experts to address certain aspect of your life or your challenges, is where you see many more perspective and possibilities, and a proper way to achieve those objectives. It's what I discovered myself through through my life.
But I think there's also a point in, there are stages in our lives, and people think that, you just have to look at, I know you're a dad, so you just have to look at children. A baby at 3 days old to a baby at 3 months old to 30 months to 3 years to 10 years. As a child grows, they eat and sleep differently.
Mhm.
And then when we hit 18, 20, suddenly everything stops. If you look at all the recommendations for vitamins and nutrients, it pretty much kind of stops. And then at the age of 45, maybe you need a little bit more iron or something. Or if you're pregnant, when you look at the government guidelines. But the reality is that there is an evolution throughout our life as to what our body needs based on what we're doing, what we're not doing. Are you training a lot? Are you not training a lot? And it's not just about volume of food, but also about the hormonal changes and our natural shifts as our body changes, and the more we embrace those changes and support them, the better we're going to live. And I think that's where, people also get stuck. Okay, I have this diet and it works. Why isn't it working for me now? Okay, there's things going on. Your stomach acid is changing, your hormone levels are changing. You need to work with it, not against it. This is how we do it.
Thanks a lot, Vanessa. It was super. It was really really uh, helpful and again informative. So if you want to know more, I'm gonna put the details to be more specific. Yeah, speak with Vanessa. Just checking as well if there are some other question
There,
on
there
workspace.
was one.
Yeah, we
So
were speaking.
so Eleanor said people get stressed also by their physical appearance. Not living, not loving, I think it is, not loving your body can generate stress. Yeah. So body image, especially in our social media age, is just rubbish. And our bodies are amazing. Is it always the case that a workout that will help us reduce stress won't help us lose weight? It's a lot more complex than just a simple session. But if you're doing everything else right in terms of weight loss and you aren't seeing it, then your exercise choice may be contributing to your stress. We want your exercise choice to be helping reduce overall stress. So even though it's a short stress for that amount of time, if you wanted to go lift weights, we wanted to actually overall reduce your adrenal response. So it can be that, overall, it's about the big picture. It's the sum of the many parts that is going to make up the whole. So 1 or 2 sessions is going to not be as significant as tackling the whole. Yeah.
Fantastic. So looking at the time, perfectly on time. Just a word to check out. One recommendation, anything you want to leave with.
I think it stems back to that in word of intention, direction. Direction starts with 1 step. It can be 1 small step, but every small step in the right direction will eventually get you to where you want to go. Health is a journey, it's not a destination, because our health is never static. Things happen, we age, that's life. So if you think that if you go to the gym, do this diet, and then in 1 month's time, 3 months' time, X is going to happen and that's it, that's where people are mistaken. Health is a lifelong journey. And when we embrace it as a journey to be enjoyed so that we can thrive in the body that we have, that is, just 1 step every day will get you to where you're going. But if you never put a single step in the right direction, you're never going to get there. So just start, and you don't have to wait till Monday. Start today.
Yeah. I love the power of mini habits. We had the chat.
Yes.
I love the power of mini habits. Do something small today, and you will see that in 1 year time, your life is completely different.
It's right. It's right. It's so right, and it's a great technique for a lot of people.
Super. Thanks again. Have a good night, and thanks to everybody that joined this live session. And speak to you soon. Ciao,
Cool.
Vanessa.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks again. Have a lovely night. Bye bye.